There's something quietly unsettling about the way most of us navigate life. We move through our days following patterns, adhering to invisible instructions, shaping our choices around expectations that no one ever actually wrote down. We apologize for simply existing. We lower our voices in meetings. We nod and say yes when everything inside us screams no. And we do it all because somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves these were the rules. But what if I told you that most of the boundaries you live by are completely imaginary? What if the very things that exhaust you, sap your energy, and keep you feeling small are nothing more than a collection of made-up limitations you've been treating like sacred law? We live in a world filled with phantom rules, chains we've wrapped around ourselves so tightly that we forget we hold the key. And the strangest part? We enforce these rules more strictly than anyone else ever could. We become our own jailers, our own judges, our own executioners of possibility. Think about it. When was the last time you wanted to do something, knew it would bring you joy, knew it wouldn't harm anyone, yet stopped yourself because it felt wrong? Not morally wrong, not genuinely harmful, just wrong according to some invisible code that exists only in your mind. Maybe you wanted to wear something that felt like you, but decided against it because it might appear too bold. Maybe you had an idea in a discussion but stayed silent because speaking up seemed presumptuous. Maybe you considered pursuing a dream, only to talk yourself out of it because people like you don't do things like that. That very phrase, people like you, is the foundation of so many phantom rules. It's the invisible fence that keeps us confined to boundaries that no one with authority ever actually drew. And here's the wild thing about these imaginary rules. They aren't coming from the law. They aren't coming from religion. They aren't even coming from your family, your friends, or your boss. They come from a voice in your head that sounds like you but speaks with the authority of a cosmic rulebook that doesn't exist. And this voice is tireless. It has an opinion on everything: how you should dress, how you should speak, what you should want, who you should be. It tells you that confidence equals arrogance, that asking for what you want is selfish, that standing out is attention-seeking, that changing your mind makes you weak. Here's the truth about phantom rules. They're relics from a world that no longer exists. They're outdated software running on modern hardware, creating glitches in your daily life that leave you frustrated, stuck, and utterly drained. You walk into a room and immediately start calculating how to make everyone else comfortable, even if it means bending yourself into someone unrecognizable. You agree in conversations with things you don't actually believe because disagreement feels dangerous. You make choices not based on desire, but on what you think you're supposed to want. The exhaustion this causes isn't ordinary tiredness. It's a deep, bone-weary fatigue of living as a stranger to yourself, constantly translating your authentic impulses through a filter of imaginary appropriateness. You edit and censor yourself so heavily that you forget what the original draft even looked like. Phantom rules whisper constantly. They insist that success means grinding yourself to burnout, that rest is laziness, that boundaries are selfish, that vulnerability is weakness, that your worth is measured by how much you give to others while asking for nothing in return. They make you believe that everyone is watching and judging, when in reality most people are too busy following their own phantom rules to notice yours. They convince you there's a right way to exist and that you're somehow failing at it. But what if there isn't a right way? What if the only rule that truly matters is treating others with respect and kindness while honoring your own truth? What if everything else is negotiable? This realization can be terrifying because phantom rules, even though they restrict you, provide a strange comfort. They give you a script, a way to navigate the world without making too many original decisions. They promise safety. Follow the invisible instructions and you'll be accepted, loved, protected. But safety that requires you to vanish isn't safety at all. Acceptance that demands you become someone else isn't acceptance. It's conditional tolerance that can be withdrawn the moment you step out of line. The most insidious phantom rules often masquerade as virtue. The rule that says putting yourself first is selfish, so you give until there's nothing left. The rule that says showing anger is ugly, so you swallow it until it turns toxic inside. The rule that says needing help is weakness, so you carry burdens alone that were meant to be shared. These rules don't make you better. They make you smaller. They don't foster connection. They create performance. And performance, no matter how polished, will never satisfy the human need to be seen and loved for who you truly are. Here's something few people realize. Phantom rules are often inherited, passed down through generations like unexamined family heirlooms. Your grandmother followed them. Your mother followed them. Now you're following them too, not because they serve you, but because they feel familiar. But familiar doesn't mean necessary. Inherited doesn't mean true. Some of the most liberated people you know are those who questioned the invisible. They looked at the patterns that were draining them and asked one simple but revolutionary question. Says who? Says who that you must earn your worth through achievement? Says who that you can't change careers after 30? Says who that your choices need explaining to people who weren't invited to decide? Says who that your value depends on enduring discomfort without complaint? When you start asking, says who, something shifts. You realize that most of the boundaries you obey exist only because you agreed to obey them. And what you've agreed to, you can choose to disagree with. This doesn't mean becoming reckless or inconsiderate. It means becoming conscious. It means distinguishing rules that genuinely serve life from rules that just feel familiar. It means deciding which boundaries protect you and which ones hold you back. The phantom rules that drain you most are the ones forcing you to betray yourself daily. The rule that your needs matter less than others. The rule that you must earn the right to exist fully. The rule that authenticity is a luxury you cannot afford. But what if authenticity isn't a luxury? What if it's the foundation of a life worth living? What if the energy spent honoring imaginary rules could instead fuel something real? Here's the truth. You're already breaking rules every day simply by being yourself. Phantom rules are contradictory, impossible to follow perfectly. You're already a rule breaker. The question is whether you'll break them consciously or keep letting them control you. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop trying to follow all the phantom rules, you often become more genuinely considerate, not less, because your actions come from choice, not compulsion, from authenticity, not anxiety, from love, not fear. But recognizing phantom rules is only the start. The real question is, what happens when you live as if they don't exist? Something remarkable happens. The world doesn't end. People don't recoil in horror. The sky doesn't fall. Your fears are more imagined than real. You speak up in a meeting, and instead of being punished, your idea is implemented. You wear what energizes you, and strangers notice differently. You say no to something that drains you, and the person simply moves on. The apocalypse you braced for never arrives. That's when you see how much energy you've been wasting, preparing for disasters that only existed in your mind. Hours rehearsing apologies for mistakes you hadn't made. Mental bandwidth devoted to reactions that would never happen. Carefully tiptoeing around traps that weren't there. But here's the tricky part. The internal prosecutor doesn't disappear overnight. That voice enforcing phantom rules doesn't just leave when you ignore it. It grows louder, more desperate, more creative in trying to get you back in the cage. It tells you you're being selfish, that you're overstepping, that people are talking behind your back, that freedom is temporary, a phase you'll regret. It weaponizes your fears and insecurities to scare you into compliance. This is the fork in the road. Surrender to the familiar prison or walk towards something unknown, but profoundly freeing. True freedom doesn't come from having no responsibilities. It comes from choosing responsibilities consciously, rather than inheriting them unconsciously. Conscious choice transforms everything. Caring because it matters to you, not because you're told to. Setting boundaries to protect something sacred in you, not because society demands it. Proactive living from the inside out. Instead of asking, what will people think? You ask, what do I think? Instead of wondering, is this allowed? You ask, does this align with who I'm becoming? Instead of seeking validation, you seek alignment with your values. It's not instant. Years of following phantom rules create deep neural pathways, impulses to shrink, apologize, second guess, and seek approval. But every time you pause and ask says who, you weaken those old patterns and strengthen new ones. New pathways lead to conversations where you speak your mind, to choices that reflect your desires, to relationships grounded in authenticity, to work that energizes rather than drains, to days that feel chosen rather than endured. Phantom rules promise safety but delivered exhaustion, promised acceptance but delivered performance anxiety, promised belonging but delivered isolation. How can you belong when you aren't yourself? Real belonging doesn't require shrinking. Real acceptance doesn't demand disappearing. Real love doesn't ask you to edit yourself. Real success doesn't require sacrificing your sanity to others' expectations. The most profound shift happens when you stop optimizing yourself for others and start optimizing for your own growth. When you ask, how can this be honest? Instead of, how can I make this easier for everyone else? Honesty becomes your antidote. Not brutal honesty that crushes others, but gentle honesty that honors both truth and kindness. Saying, this doesn't work for me, without justification. Admitting, I've changed my mind, without apology. Declaring, I want something different, without permission. This honesty creates space for others to be honest, for relationships to breathe, for possibilities to emerge. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. You discover yourself. The person you are without phantom rules is worth knowing. Your thoughts, your desires, your boundaries, your dreams. Someone who can contribute fully, not by disappearing into the world, but by showing up completely within it. Phantom rules told you that your authentic self was too much, too little, too broken. But what if your authentic self is exactly what the world needs? What if the thing you've been hiding or editing is actually your gift? You don't need permission to stop following rules that don't exist. You don't need validation to choose growth, truth, and authenticity. The phantom rules have drained you long enough. The invisible chains have kept you small long enough. You already have the key. You've always had it. The question is, are you ready to use it? On the other side of these phantom rules lies a life that's genuinely yours, not the life you think you should want, but the one you truly do. Not the person others expect, but the person you're meant to become. And that person is worth breaking a few imaginary rules for. If this message stirred something within you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Someone else might be walking the same silent path, waiting for a sign that they're not alone. Stay grounded. Stay thoughtful. Stay awake. For more deep dives into philosophy, the human experience, and timeless truths, subscribe and turn on the bell. Wander the void with wonder. Question deeply. Think freely. Until next time, embrace the silence and let it speak.